This is Angela Gartner, editor with Northeast Ohio Parent Magazine. We are here with Dr. Jay Berk, and he is going to do his presentation helping parents and kids manage electronics and video games. And this is especially important during this time of virtual learning and a lot more kids on the screens. Just to introduce Dr. Berk, Dr. Jay Berk is a licensed psychologist in 2 states and an expert in working with children, adolescents, and families. He also works with opposition-defiant children and their families, as well as social skills, acquisition, groups for children and adolescents. In addition to providing therapy, Dr. Berk has provided training and workshops throughout the country to schools, agencies, and a variety of groups. And just some housekeeping notes as we go through the session. Please go ahead and put your question in the chat, and we will get to as many questions throughout the session and during the session, after the presentation, as much as we can. But I am going to turn it over to Dr. Berk, and he's going to go ahead and begin. Welcome, Dr. Berk.
Thank you for the invite. I appreciate it. Just a real quick background. A little bit, we have offices in Beechwood, Westlake, and Austinburg, Ohio now. And we also do telehealth and in-person because people have been asking about that. And so the virtual opportunities there for people if they want some help or if they want in-person. We also have Perspectives Academy, an alternative education program for kids grades 3 through 12. And you talked about the social skills groups because the reason that I wanted to do this is we've been getting a lot of requests at the practice for kids having trouble with electronics, and certainly because of COVID, that's increased significantly. So I appreciate the invite to be able to talk and give information that's helpful to parents and hopefully to your kids. So let me start off with a little bit of information. So if anybody's old like me, and you remember jobs, and you think about a job that doesn't exist anymore. So for fun, if you guys monitor the chat for a second, if there's any parent out there that's listening, can you chat me a job and then she can read it that doesn't exist anymore? Jobs that used to be. Now, I'll tell you one of my favorite, if anybody's old enough. There used to actually be somebody that operated the elevator for you, and that doesn't exist anymore. And if you will chat any jobs that you can think of for a second, I'll give you a second one. Anybody that's old enough to remember pulling into the gas station and they wiped your windows, checked your oil, checked air in your tires, life has changed significantly from that, except if you are in New Jersey or Oregon where those jobs still exist. Did anybody chat you any jobs by chance that don't exist anymore?
No, but I mean, definitely the gas station attendant. I'm sorry. Yeah, the gas station attendant where they pump your gas is something that probably doesn't exist anymore, or
it's hard to find, isn't it, right?
Yeah.
And so one of the things that I want to talk about today as I start to think about this is that electronics, people say, well, electronics are bad or good, but actually electronics exist sort of as a neutral party. As a matter of fact, they're going to be there because they're part of our life. And so if you look at my little cartoon here, what do you want to be when you grow up? A doctor, an astronaut, or policeman? Those used to be the things that kids talked about. And now kids want to be a blogger, a freelancer, cryptocurrency miner, or a YouTuber, or a video game streamer. So people are looking at this different, and we have a term called digital natives, and kids growing up today are digital natives in that they're growing up in a society where their phone in their pocket has more computing power in it than the Apollo moon mission did. So which I think is really important to think about how kids are experiencing school itself, how they experience home. And there's a great movie called The Social Experiment. If anybody's seen it, it's on Netflix. If you haven't seen it, check it out. And they have the people that invented the like button for Facebook and they have the person that invented the continuous scroll and how they hook people on these things, which are really important to understand because you're being manipulated, but you don't even know you're being manipulated, which is pretty incredible. So I'm going to ask this question, and I'll let you guys do a vote kind of silently here. Where is the most money spent in today's world? Now, if you remember the old days when we just had fun playing outside, putting your footprints in cement. Anybody remember doing that? I wrote my name in cement on the street. That's still there in University Heights from years ago when I was a kid. But games, music, or movies? Games, music, or movies. Now, if anybody wants to chat or my co-host there, what do you think?
Probably computers, right? Games. Somebody said games.
Think about this.
Games is Tanya Foods, and I'm so sorry if I said your name wrong. She said games is probably the most money spent.
Yeah, significantly more or not. So parents, think about this. Here's something pretty incredible. I'll let you look at a graphic here. And the graphic is, this is since 2001. Blue is money that went in the music industry. Green is money that's in the film industry. And yellow is money in the video game industry, which is pretty incredible to think about if you're looking at this graph. So what it tells you is the money that goes into the video game industry now is majorly greater than movies and music combined. Not even close, in millions and millions of dollars. That's where the money is in changing the world. And if you're a parent of a kid out there, you know when you say, what do you want for a present? It's hard to find a gift that's not electronic or related to electronics. And I think that's important to think about if you look at this graph and understand how much money's out there and how people are being pulled into these things. All right, so let's do some fun questions here. The #1 video game last year in sales. See if anybody knows this. And we can make it some real fun if you want. They could actually text me if you want. If anybody's sitting there with your phone, 216-606-5502. If you want to text me your answer, what do you think the #1 video game was last year in sales? 216-606-5502. If anybody wants to text me directly, see if anybody knows what that game was. #1 video game last year in sales. Anybody quick with the texting? You can play the texting game.
Well, somebody in
Somebody
the chat,
chatted.
Somebody said, Tanya again said Call of Duty.
Call of Duty. Anybody, any other guesses in there?
No other guesses. I think that's a pretty good guess.
Pretty good guess. Answer is actually Fortnite. #1 game last year is Fortnite, and the sales of Fortnite, just so people understand what we're talking about, last year was $4 billion. $4 billion. So they had a Fortnite World Championship where you could win $4 million, which kids went to and a lot of kids played. And I think that's important to think about, that kind of money is in the games now. It's huge, 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 huge money. What is Among Us? So maybe some parents out there, you don't know this. This is the new hot game out there. It's called Among Us. And the game is virtually like Clue. So basically there's a killer. You got to figure out who the killer is. You have to accuse the killer. And these are some things that I think parents should know about. Third one, what is a loot box? So a loot box is really an interesting phenomenon based on, if anybody's been to Denny's and they have that bunch of bad stuff with one good thing you want to get with the claw machine, and the claw machine goes in and grabs one thing. But loot boxes are where kids buy skins, they get special limited edition things. And this is where I have a lot of kids who are stealing parents' money. I had a kid do $11,000 last month from stealing from the parents to get money to buy things like loot boxes and skins. Skin's what you look like in a game. You don't want to be the default skin that makes you a loser. That's bad. Now, when you think about how games are created, and this is important for parents to be aware of, and if you're understanding why electronics are so difficult, games today, they change the design. You don't buy the game anymore. What happens is they give you the game for free. And that's great because once you got the game, they make their money off microtransactions. And microtransactions are small transactions that add up over time and build up bit by bit by bit. Now, if you're a parent out there, some things to be aware of. Generally, your credit card is hooked to the game or your PayPal account is hooked to the game, and you might not even be aware of that. So you might want to check, is your credit card, is your PayPal account hooked to the game, even though you didn't buy the game, because your kid can spend money that you don't know about. And microtransactions are where the games are making money. Okay, and I think that's a really important thing for parents to be aware of. The question I get is, are electronics bad for kids? And electronics are here to stay. So I akin it to an eating disorder and the fact that you have to eat. The question is, are you going to eat healthy or not eat healthy? And what we have to do is teach kids to manage electronics in a healthy manner. Okay, what's happened is that they're engineering electronics to be more addictive than ever. And I think that's important because they're based on a lot of the Las Vegas principles of gambling. And if you're aware of those, they know how to keep you involved. One of which is what's called a near miss. So if you've ever played a slot machine, it goes 7, 7, and then, oh, I'm one click off. They're engineered to be that way to keep you in there. Also, for a lot of parents to understand, why does your kid not want to get off the game? Because if they're in the middle of the game and they quit the middle of the game, they can get banned from the game. And a lot of parents aren't aware of that, or they're letting down their teammates. So when we were kids, you'd be on the games or TV for a period of time. Now, once a kid's involved in the game, they don't want to drop off the game. What's digital citizenship? So digital citizenship is teaching your kid in school, at home, how to handle electronics in a healthy manner. So for example, we have kids in the country killing themselves nowadays over being bullied electronically. And this has happened in the Cleveland area. I'm not going to get into the case, but I do want to talk with you about the fact that teaching your kids that they can actually do more damage with the phone than they can with a car or something else at times. So digital citizenship will be something that schools should be teaching, parents should be teaching their kids. Okay, now maybe you've heard your kid talk about streaming. And streaming is an important aspect to understand that there are streamers, one of which is a video game guy called Ninja. Maybe you've heard of Ninja before. And these guys make millions and millions of dollars off streaming, and the more people that watch them stream, and then they have codes that they give out that if you buy or purchase things using their code, that person gets money off that, which is important to think about. So we've got this idea about streaming is different than when maybe we were kids where you had a TV show you watched at a certain time. You can watch a streamer whenever they're on, or you can watch a YouTube video of that person streaming. Digital footprint. A lot of kids don't understand that once they put something out there, it is out there forever. And I think this is an important part for parents to be teaching kids about. That they think that if you delete it, it goes away, when in actuality, it never goes away. Anything that's on the web is there for life. Okay, now this gets really interesting. Are online friends true friends? Now, a lot of parents are arguing with their kids about you go out and play and hang out with some kids and go do some stuff. And what we find is that these kids are now finding that it's easier just to hop online because you're going to find somebody playing the exact same game that you want to play at the exact same time you want to play it with the exact same interest. So what we're finding is kids are losing interest in other activities, Boy Scouts, sports, things like this, which is a sign that your kid has a problem. Now, the reverse of that is actually true too, that parents that keep their kids involved in other activities, scouts, youth groups, activities like that, is one of the ways to limit them from having overconsumption issues. Gambling is not allowed in kids' video games. Actually, true or false? You can think about that, and the answer to it is false. There's a game called Grand Theft Auto where kids can actually just go into a casino and can gamble in a casino. Actually, I had a 9-year-old come in and tell me he wanted to go to a strip bar, and I said, "What's in a strip bar?" And he said, "Women on poles, and you go up to the bar." And I go, "How do you know that?" And the answer is Grand Theft Auto, which brings me to another point for parents, which is know what games your kids are playing. There's a reason that they're rated a certain way, and you want to know what they're playing and who they're playing with. Okay, there are brain changes in games, true or false? Now, this is also something to think about in that they found that the brain gets dopamine hits, little dopamine hits off gaming. And it actually gets the same off social media in times when you get likes and things like that. And so in true gamer kids, those that play professionally, they don't get that dopamine hit because it's more of a job. But for kids that are these gamers intermittently, that gets to be a problem because that dopamine doesn't come in other ways like sports, friends, clubs, things like we used to get those dopamine hits. Parents report what issues the most. So the big issues that I'm seeing in my practice are kids stealing money, kids not doing well on their schoolwork. Kids got great ideas. What they can do is they can be on their laptop while they're supposed to be at school and hold their phone ahead of them so you can't see it. And one of the things I recommend to parents is that a separate area for your kid to do their schoolwork is really a good idea if you think about it. Because if they're in a separate area, they're more likely to not have the distractions that they have in the same room as their games. Parents report rage issues. That's when the kid rages and is virtually very different when they get off the games. Okay, and parents will report the kid destroying the house, sleep issues, things like that. These are signs that your kid's having a problem versus gaming just being a part of their life. And there are sort of levels of this. There's just gaming for recreation. There's gaming overconsumption or electronic overconsumption challenges, and then there's addiction issues. What is code switching? Code switching is the ability for kids to learn to change their social behavior given different environments. Now, if you know anything about the internet and what kids are on, they're on servers now. And on some of these servers, they can find anybody who's interested in the same thing they're interested in. And so code switching is being aware of your environment, being aware of what you say, when you say it, and teaching kids what to say and what to expose themselves to in terms of information. But knowing who your kid's talking to also includes knowing what pictures they're putting out there. Because there's a thing called geotagging, which is if I take a picture of my cell phone right now and I forward it to any of you at home, a good person that knows the computer knows how to go into that geotag and you tell where it's taken, when it's taken. And people that are trying to get advantage of your kid will get them to send a picture like that or take a picture in front of the house because it has an address on it. Take a picture in front of a license plate where the person can locate them. What is an online persona? Why does an online persona often not match the terrestrial persona? So what's happening is there's a lot of kids out there when they're having a problem, and I'd like you to think about this again. A lot of people game healthy. That's not a problem. But there are two types of problem gamers. One who wants conquest and one who is so unhappy in their own life that basically their online life becomes happier than their real life. And that's why their persona does not match, because their online life is different. Now, if you want some information on it, there is a book I wrote called A Parent's Quick Guide to Electronic Addiction. It's available on Amazon. A good book for parents to read and a good book for kids to read too. Pretty user-friendly material that might be helpful for parents if they're interested, that I think would be helpful to you. Okay, let me keep moving forward because we got lots of information. So digital natives are different in that kids growing up today are growing up in a world where they're surrounded by digital media and electronics. So if you take a look at this picture and you can see, can you tell me what's wrong with this picture? Give you a second to think about it. So no, that is not a jewel. That was the last guess I had from somebody. That is not a jewel. It is actually a USB drive. If you know anything about this, is you don't plug a USB drive in to be charged. But technology keeps changing and changing and changing so quickly that kids who are digital natives know a lot more than their parents. And a lot of parents will ask me, what can we do to manage our kids' electronics? And you can get things like Circle or systems like that. But basically what happens is that you're probably not going to lock down every single thing that is possible. So you have to work with your child on healthy use of electronics. And trust me, the earlier, the better. The earlier you're working on this, the better, because the later it gets, the harder it is to change. Okay, some other interesting things is, what are the parents doing to model good use of electronics? So if the parents are modeling good use of electronics, you're probably going to see a kid having a better use of electronics. But the electronics, again, phones, and if you watch the movie I told you about, you'll see that they're engineered to get our attention. They are fighting for microbursts of our attention to sell you data, to sell your data, to get your attention to a product, things like that. Now, what's amazing is that you're driving, your phone goes off, there's a sound, you just got a text. You know, how many of you out there stop at that light and look at your text? And I'll bet you many of you guys thinking about this actually do raise your hand and think that you actually do that. Because you are programmed to do that, because you're sitting there going, oh, what if it's something important, something like that. So I think that's really critical to the goal. So times have changed. Even parents are asking me this. So used to be when you were bad, your mom drug you inside and you weren't allowed to play outside. Maybe some of you guys remember playing outside. I grew up around here and I remember playing outside, which was really a fun thing. But now it's getting kids outside. And what I want to tell you is another helpful hint for parents, which is if you are helping your child grow up with activities, you're probably going to see less of these electronic problems that are occurring with many kids. Now, what I mean by that is I water skied since I was really young. Our family water skied. Maybe your family's snow skiers. Maybe your family's campers. But what happens is the family has to get the kid involved in activities that then become part of their life. Because what we find is kids with electronic addiction issues or electronic overconsumption issues have this unbalance of other activities. Now,
Hey,
yeah, go ahead.
Dr. Burke, I have a question. So, you know, with so many kids doing virtual schooling right now, and a lot of activities, you know, being, you know, either virtual now or not going on.
Canceled, yeah.
Yeah, how can parents manage, you know, them being on the screen all day, and then also then manage them getting off the screen when, you know, right now there is limited activities and still, you know, a lot of limited movement for parents and kids at this point.
Yeah, Angela, great question. So thank you for asking. So let me tell you what some of my kids are doing. The family can get off the system at night and they can play board games. They go on a hike in the park Kids can meet places if parents organize it outside that are safe. There are online activities that kids can join. I do want to tell you this past summer, I ran a program at Grand River Academy. We'll be doing one at Christmas break and another one next summer, which is an electronic free summer program or winter program coming up, because we have a program called Reboot at Grand River, which is for kids with electronic overconsumption issues. And we found that some of the simpler things work better. So getting back to board games, cards, getting out to the park, doing some things like that make a difference. And I do have kids that are virtually interacting with other kids, playing board games, playing chess, things like that. Now, it's not perfect by any means, because it's really a lot harder than it was. But there are some activities happening out there, and especially some that are outside, that are working better. Does that make sense, Angela?
Yeah, and I mean, you probably cover this, but you know, I know a lot of kids are, you know, parents are right now, like the kids are, you know, on the screen. They're supposed to be doing school, but they're might be hiding behind the camera and still playing games all day. So you might cover that, but you know, just what are some ways that, you know, we could make sure our kids are actually doing schoolwork when they're supposed to be doing schoolwork?
Well, there are programs out there that you can run that you can see what screen they have up if you're a parent working. Because what'll happen is they'll have tabs and they'll switch between the tabs. And I think they're pretty quick at that. Oftentimes, if parents are working at home, having the kid work in the same room as the parent actually works pretty well. Having the parent, I have parents who have cameras in the kids' room while they're doing their work, so you can see what screen the kid's on, I think is important. I did have a kid put a can of soup in front of the camera, and another kid put a picture of himself in front of the camera. That was pretty entertaining. So I would say keeping in touch with the teachers and letting the teachers know if there's any abnormalities or the kids' grades are going down. But in deference to that too, there are some kids that are just not going to do virtual well, especially ADHD kids, kids with learning challenges, and they may have an IEP or a 504 plan, but they're still struggling. And so part of which is there are some kids where they're doing a hybrid program, 2 days virtual, 2 days in school. And some of those kids, I've asked the school to have the kid there 4 days a week because they just can't concentrate from home. And I think there are some kids where that is just simply the case. Looking at a screen all day is just not the most entertaining thing for kids or parents. I'm going to cover a little bit more about that in a minute. Let me just
Okay,
do
and
this.
I don't know if you want to take this question real quick.
Go ahead, fire away on a question.
Yeah, Tanya, we have a question from our audience. Tanya Foos, she's asked, how does a kid's brain change with video games or from trauma?
So what they found was that the dopamine hits that you get from video games are hard to be replaced by other things. And so that's why they come to the video games, because the dopamine is the chemical that makes you feel good. And what happens is other things don't give that immediate dopamine that you can get from a video game so quickly. And so the research is showing, and there's more research about this, is that we've got to get kids more balanced from the start, or else they are going to become addicted, almost like the same as heroin with individuals with drug habits. That's what the research has shown about it. Now, again, that doesn't mean casual video game users, because there's kids that are just casual video game users, which is different. Is that the only question that's up there, Angela?
Yeah, okay,
Okay.
that's it for right now.
All right, let me go forward then. So even gifts have changed, and here's another hint for parents when Christmas or Hanukkah comes up or things like that. You asked me how to get them to do other things. One thing is not to give them gift certificates for gaming systems and things like that, but to go to Sky Zone or the trampoline places if you feel comfortable with that, or getting them Legos, because universally everybody builds Legos, or science kits or things like that, or hobbies, archery, things like that that kids can do that will involve them in more activities than they're used to. I love this posting. When your grandparents don't understand what you want for Christmas and the kid wanted an iPad, I think that's a great picture. So something to think about. Activities have changed too. Now, I do want to talk about this. A lot of parents are not aware, but there are esports teams starting now. So a lot of the high schools, colleges, Ohio State has an esports team. So electronic sports teams where they're actually playing electronic games as a sport. And again, what I'm going to say about this is that that could be social if handled right. That does not have to be a bad thing. Spire Academy is doing it if you're familiar with them. And what we're talking about is the idea that getting kids a healthy balance so that they're not on games all night, all day, throwing off their sleep. What I have found is that another effect is not only the dopamine part, but that kids are losing the ability to do some of the things that we did when we were kids. There are many kids now that don't know how to ride a bike, and you're thinking, what do you do with the family? And one thing is get out on a family bike ride. Because kids aren't riding bikes, they're not getting the gross motor skills that we had. Because they don't have the gross motor skills, they're having trouble on the playground. And again, you don't have to be a super athlete. You don't have to be LeBron, but on most playgrounds, if you can throw or catch a ball, kids will include you in a game more. If you can ride a bike, you can go with your friends places. And again, if they're going to do esports, having a balance of other activities is super important. Next thing is encouraging parents to let younger kids play. Getting materials out. Anybody remember playing with stuff that you weren't supposed to play with? I thought this is a great picture. But clay and paint and things like that that kids can do, because we've moved away from kids having those experiences, because kids very young now are given video games very early. And hopefully if they're going to do archery, they learn to do it right. I thought this is great. Posting too. Don't shoot your dad with the arrow. It'd be great. Okay, where do kids get new activities from? Family, friends, and school. Something to think about. So school right now, not so easy to get activities because a lot of them are shut down. There's starting to be more of them happening. I got kids doing marching band. I got kids doing sports. So some are opening up more, and I encourage you to think about this, because even if you don't play a sport, you socialize. If you're on the bus, you're with kids, you're going places. If you're in marching band, you go out to dinner after marching band on Friday night. And that's where kids have those experiences. And again, the family having some roots to those. By the way, this is me when I was little. We used to go fishing a lot. And so learning those new activities, I think, is super important. Now, academic stressors, this is what it looks like now for kids at school. Bullying, remote learning, academic struggles. So a lot of kids, what we're seeing is they're having trouble because they're being bullied on the electronic media. The remote learning is boring for them, or they're distracted, or they have academic struggles themselves. So if your kid is remote learning and having trouble, don't just think about getting them a tutor. Think about what the problem really is. Is it a problem where their ADHD meds need adjustment? Is it a problem where they need more movement because they have sensory problems? You know, what is getting in the way of them? There's some research that actually shows, this is an interesting picture, I pulled it for a reason, that if you write down notes, actually physically write a note rather than type it in a keyboard, you are more likely to remember that material. So that is something else that parents can keep in mind in helping kids who are having academic struggles working remotely. Again, is taking physical notes makes a difference.
Hey, Dr. Berk.
Yeah.
How can parents have conversations, and you're probably going to cover this in this, but can you talk a little bit about how parents can have conversations about remote learning and their technology use?
Okay, can you give me a specific about that? I'll be happy to answer it.
Like having that conversation with them about having a balance between, yes, you're doing remote learning and you're doing virtual, learning, but you also have to have a balance, you know, because you know that, you know, they still want to play their games afterwards, but you still have to have some kind of balance. I think for as parents, it's hard to start those conversations. And we've talked about it before, hitting the reset button, especially as we are now beginning to get used to this virtual learning.
Yeah, so I want to talk, let me talk about that for a second, relating to that, which would be the earlier you set up a system in your house, the better off you're going to be. So if the kid has been loose on games and electronics from the start and you're trying to reel them back in, you're going to have a problem. So I suggest to parents that you start up a skill, you know, plan from the beginning. Now, in my book, and I talk a lot about this when I do therapy with families, is we do a thing called pay to play. Now, pay to play virtually is the answer to that question, I think, for a lot of people. And pay to play means that the kid gets a basic amount of electronic time per day, but then if they exercise, they socialize, they go out and do something, ride a bike, they can earn extra time based on activities that you're trying to get them to do. And I think having that discussion and tracking that time is important. And again, the earlier you do that, the better. If you've got an older kid and you haven't done it and you're putting the brakes on, it gets harder to do. So you asked me about school. I thought this was a great posting. This is what the first day of school looked like for lots of kids this year. And let me just give a couple tips. Setting up the environment. So if you've got 3 screens around you, it's easy to have Fortnite going on one screen while you have your schoolwork on another screen while you have social media on another. So parents understanding that maybe the kid should not have multiple screens going at the same time. Maybe a different room so that if the kid's on a Chromebook, they're in a different room on the Chromebook where you can see them, you can monitor them, I think really makes a difference. For a lot of kids, especially younger kids, I think breaks are important. And breaks meaning that a lot of these kids can't sit that long. And I don't know that that's abnormal. I think that's just kids. For example, we have an alternative education program in my office, and our kids go out walking every single day because that movement is so important. Medications I talked about. I want to just say something again, is that as your kid gets older, if they're on remote learning, focus may be an issue. And so talking with the prescriber could make a difference. Talking with the school about IEP requirements. So how are they delivering the IEP with the kid being remote is important. So many of the kids I have an intervention specialist who meets with them before or after the virtual classes to help them to manage their workload, and that meets the IEP requirements. Working with the parent, if the parent's working at home, I think is good. I talked about the hybrid may not work so well because some kids, the hybrid just doesn't work. And so being there 4 days a week might be better than 2 days. And if you ask the school, they may allow for that. Sleep. I recommend to parents that kids turn in their electronics at night because I have kids that, well, you'd be surprised. They're sneaking up at 3 in the morning, getting their electronics out, and parents don't even know it because they're playing games with kids over in England or Australia on different time zones. But the most important is having a daily schedule. And the daily schedule is what you agree with the kid. And I say if they're younger kids, you should post the schedule, which has what time you eat at, get up at. Keeping the same schedule every day makes a big difference for a lot of families. So if they're working remotely, that schedule and keeping to the schedule is so important for them. Angela, does that answer your questions that you were asking about?
Yeah, I know we've talked about this before, but maybe talk a little bit about, because a lot of parents right now are working from home, you know, how to manage, you know, your kids' virtual schooling and technology while you're also working. And I know you mentioned about work along the parent, but maybe if you can explain that a little more.
So I'll just give you some examples of what I have kids doing. I have kids where the parent is seated right next to the kid. They're doing their work. The kid's doing their work. I have parents where the parents have a camera on the kid where they're watching if they're on what screens. I have parents that come in periodically and check the kid's history in their computer. If you don't know how to do that, you might want to be able to do that. And by the way, if the history is erased, there's a problem. I have parents who make a contract with the kid to say what they will and won't do during the day in terms of going on other electronics. And there's a reward for them if they stay to the contract, which I think is important to earn that trust because you want the kid to be able to manage it. And I think one of the most important is if the kid's having problems being focused or doing the work, that they're able to talk to their parents about what the struggle is. Because again, remote learning doesn't work so well for everybody. Now, I have kids where there's an older, they go to a tutor afterwards because a tutor will help them with things. But if they're missing, for example, foundation skills, like I have a kid right now that just came into my practice who's in high school but missing foundation math skills, it's a problem even more remote than it was before. So I think that there's a lot of opportunities there for parents. But again, the idea is to do a collaborative problem solving. Collaborative problem solving is the idea that rather than telling your kid what to do, you sit with them and you work on a plan collaboratively that you agree to, and you agree to the rewards and consequences if they do it and if they don't do it in advance. And that way kids feel more control over their environment, which I think is helpful to them. Does that answer your question, Angela?
Yep. And we have, yep, I'm looking for them. We're all looking for the more slides. So
Looking for what?
looking forward to more your slides.
Yeah, so let me just say a couple other things. My alternative education program, Perspectives Academy, we take grades 3 through 12. And what we found is that there's other rewards that really work well for kids. For example, we have a dog that is an emotional support dog that is a huge reward for kids. And so pets can be distracting, but pets can also be a huge opportunity as a reinforcer for kids to learn responsibility, to take the dog for a walk, to take the dog to the bathroom, and to be responsible and teach responsibility for schoolwork, just like you have to be responsible for your pet. And I think that's pretty cool to think about because there are some kids with anxiety due to social issues or depression, learning issues, high functioning autism that have trouble in those environments. And yet an animal can really make a difference. So an emotional support animal or a pet can be a good way to go. Okay, a couple other questions that are interesting. The average length of time spent playing video games per week. An estimated blank percent of American households play video games. An estimated blank percent of 3,334 participants in the study show signs of video game addiction. And 4% of study participants were categories of extreme users who played video games blank hours per week. Parents always ask me, well, how much time should I give my kid on electronics? And what I want to remind you is electronics includes not just video games, but includes TV, it includes other things that they do, social media, things like that. So keep that in mind. Here's some interesting answers. The average length of time spent playing video games was 20 hours per week. I think that this is probably low right now, but this is what the study said. 72% of American households play video games. More boys than girls, by the way, play video games. And more boys socialize with their friends online than in real life, by the way. An estimated 9% of the kids in the study showed signs of gaming addiction, and only 4% were categorized as extreme users. So when do you know it's a problem? Let me see if this video will play and see if this works. Is that playing, Angela?
It is. But we can't hear it.
Can't hear it? Can't hear the sound?
Right.
That's what I was afraid of. All right, I'm going to skip that. I don't have the right settings set up. So set limits early. I'll talk to you about the video. And what it is a kid smashing holes in walls, using a golf club to break things, swearing at the mom, and basically getting them off the games is the problem. At that point, you need help. So I would say to parents, if you're getting to a point where the kid's getting that out of control, get help. Unfortunately, I can't play the video because the sound's not going to play. Set limits early and get help early if needed. So if it's a nice day, and this is why I like this picture, kids should be outside. And it's Cleveland, Ohio, and we know winter's coming, which is going to make things even more difficult for families. But if it's a nice day and kids are sitting inside all on their own device, that's a problem. Okay. So time on games, people always ask me this, how much time should kids have on games? So 0 to 1, 1 to 2, and age 2 to 4. So the World Health Organization gave some suggestions. 0 to 1, no time on electronics was suggested by the World Health Organization, which I thought was pretty fascinating. 1 to 2, limited time on electronics, and ages 2 to 4, they said no more than 2 hours per day, which I think is a lot of time. Going forward, I want to talk about this idea again of having some base time for kids. And again, if they get all their schoolwork done, everything's turned in and you check Power School and everything's there, pay to play works. So if your grades are good and you're doing stuff, that does not mean unlimited time. But if your grades are good and you got everything in, then you pay to play. If you go work out, pay to play. If you do something with a friend. Now, the other thing is when they play games. So watch out for kids in the middle of the night playing games. Watch out for just before bedtime. The research suggests that the blue light before bedtime actually activates your brain. And so getting kids off into a nighttime routine helps them with their schoolwork too. Because if you notice, some kids are having trouble getting up for school, being awake because the nighttime routine is not settled. Okay, if you have older kids, watch that they don't have a phone that they bought off somebody at school.
And it looks like we did lose Dr. Berk. I'm hoping he comes back on. If not, feel free to chat your question and I can always get back to you for Dr. Berk. And also, we are having our noon session coming up for the Cleveland Clinic, which is the work-school balance, the mental health wellness for parents and kids. Oh, here he comes. Dr.
Coming
Berk?
back up. Can you hear me?
Yeah, we actually have to end the session, but I just want to give you a moment to say, I'm so sorry that I'm not sure how you dropped out.
Yeah, it just lost me on the system. It's okay.
But can you just tell everybody, just finally say how they can reach you, and then I told them with any questions, we'll get them out to you as well.
Yeah, that'd be great. So the office phone number is 216-292-7170. But if you want information about the practice, you go to jberkphd.com. And there's a lot of information on the website. And in summary, what I want to just share with you is not all electronics are a problem for kids. It's getting them a healthy balance is really what I would like parents to be thinking about. And we have lots of activities around us that can do that. The earlier the interventions, the better. And I think that's important to think about for parents. And again, the earlier, if you're having a problem, the earlier intervene, the better. And getting a system set up from the start would be something that I would suggest. If your kid's having trouble on remote learning, intervene earlier rather than later. Remote learning is tough for lots of kids and doubly tough for kids with educational, emotional, social challenges. So I appreciate Parent Magazine asking me to be a part of this. I'm more than happy to help out any parents if they've got questions. Give us a call. 216-292-7170. And I appreciate Parent Magazine, Northeastern Ohio Parent Magazine, sponsoring this information because I think it's important for parents to get. Thank you.
And Dr. Berk, thank you so much. I think your presentation was very helpful. And again, we are actually going to have this presentation up, and we have Dr. Berk's information up as well. So you can contact him, and you can also view this. You'll be able to view this presentation until the end of October. But thank you, Dr. Berk. We're going to sign off and get ready for the next session. But thank you again for coming today.
Yeah, I think again for parents too to gather resources is important. Just in closing. Because I know COVID's really tough for a lot of people, but there are resources, there are social activities, there are school supports, and there are things out there. And so just if you need help, give us a call and we'll suggest you in the right direction. Thanks again, Angela.
Thank you. Have a great day. Thank you, Dr. Berk. We'll talk soon.
Yeah.